Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. Very excited and happy to welcome back Maria Pérez-Cejuela López. Welcome
You're
back.
getting better at this.
That's good because my wife tells me that my Spanish is actually not improving at all, and it's actually getting worse. So at least one person I get.
Practice makes perfect.
There you go. I'm gonna get back on the practice. So very happy to welcome you back. Today, we are talking about Capture One, workflow, sessions, as well as tethering. So just a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions related to any of this, please feel free to get them in. If you're joining us here on Zoom, you can use the Q&A tab. And if you're joining us here on Vimeo or Facebook and watching, you can use the comment section. Huge thank you, as always, besides just to Maria, but also to Capture One for sponsoring this event. And of course, everybody at home for tuning in. But I won't take up any more of Maria's time so that she can have the most amount of time to show you what she's going to be working on. So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you back in a little while.
Thanks, Scott, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here again. It's great being with you guys. Just a little reminder, this is the second event of a 6-part series that's going to be spreading out across the next months. So we are dedicating this event today to workflow. We actually are dedicating 2 events of this series for workflow because this is some part of Capture One that you get the most questions about. And whenever I'm teaching webinars about workflow, tethering, sessions, cataloging, and stuff like that, I feel it's what brings out the most questions. So this is why we plan it this way, and I hope it's going to be useful. Because it's like too much to do sessions and catalogs on the same session, we'll be dedicating today exclusively to a session workflow and tethering. Well, if you don't know what a session is, you will know after today for sure. It's going to be a very hands-on session, but before jumping into that, I did want to explain briefly what sessions is about. So sessions is actually the first way of managing files that was ever created with Capture One. So back then in the early thousands, there was no cataloging in Capture One, only sessions. And this makes a lot of sense if you start thinking where Capture One comes from. So it's coming from Phase One, the old medium format digital back cameras, the first ones. And back then they didn't have a screen. It was like the early days of digital. So some of these cameras, they didn't have a screen. So Capture One was born as a tethering software specifically for that, and specifically it worked as an extension of the camera. So basically, if you wouldn't tether to Capture One using your computer and a tethering cable, you were unable to see what you were shooting, kind of like analog days. So that's the reason why Capture One was born. It was an extension of these digital back cameras. So it was meant for people who were shooting in the studio a lot, and high-end photographers who were the ones who have access to these cameras. So high-end fashion and commercial photographers. But nowadays, of course, Capture One is something completely different. And tethering is available for all kinds of cameras. Today, I'm going to be using a Canon camera, but you can use pretty much any brand that is compatible, and plenty of them are compatible with tethering. Most of Fuji, Canon, Sony, Nikon, and Leica cameras are compatible with tethering nowadays. I'm going to start showing you what a session looks like actually, and how you can get the most out of it. So I'm going to now share my screen. And I thought that we can just start this all the way from the beginning, and we can do that just by creating a new session. So let's just hit here, new session. Whoopsie. And we're just going to call it tethering demo. I'm going to place it on my desktop because I will be coming back to show you some of this stuff, what is happening internally in the session, because I think it's important for you to understand what is happening. And let's just click OK. And a new blank session is created, all right? Before we start going into Capture One, actually, I think it's important that you see, as I say, what happened in the desktop. So it's actually on my other monitor. So I'm just going to drag it all the way here. You can see that a new folder was created by Capture One, and it's called the same as I call the whole session. It's called Tethering Demo. And if I double click on this, we can see that there is some things also happen within this folder. So there is 4 different subfolders and the session file, which is actually, well, what will then launch Capture One when we click here. This is like the session file itself. And the rest is like 4 different subfolders that were created by Capture One. And this will always happen when you create a session, and it's how it's supposed to work. And it's for a very good reason. And you will understand it as we speak about it in this session. So these 4 different folders are capture, output, selects, and trash. It's pretty self-explanatory, I think, but just in case, let's just go over it. So capture is where by default all of your files that you're shooting Tether are going to go. That is going to happen automatically. It will also happen like that if you try to import files into a session. But because of the origin of Capture One that I was explaining before, it makes a lot of sense that sessions are meant for tethering. Of course, you can also use them for importing your files, but where they really shine is where you should tether, because it's like a very good structure for that, and it's what was created for, and it makes a lot of sense that it's like that. By the way, I forgot to say about if you have any questions at any point, excuse me, just put them in the chat, and then I will just go back to them in the end of the session. So capture, where all the files will go by default, all the captured files if you want. Output is where the processed files are going to go. So once that you are exporting your raw files into any kind of image format, they're going to go to output by default. Select is something that you can decide whether you want to use or not. Today we will use it for just to show you how it would be like. But it's like a folder where you would manually place the photos that you want to work with. This is your selection. And the trash, well, it's where all the trash files will go if you trash any files. So this is what happened in the Finder or Windows Explorer. It works in the same way. And let's just go back to Capture One. So the session is empty right now. There is no files. It's supposed to be like that because I prepared a little setup for shooting tethered. It's not the best setup ever, so I apologize for that. There was like a problem with the lights. The hot shoe decided it was not the day to work, so I had to solve it as I could. But I hope it will be okay for showing you how it works. So here in the empty session, first of all, we have the library, like also in the catalog, but here in the library, instead of having albums and catalog collections, we have the session folders. And if you take a look here, it's exactly the same as we can see in the Finder. So we have capture, select, output, and trash. Just if there is any doubt, there it is. It's exactly the same, right? So let's go back into Capture One. There is also a possibility to use session albums and session favorites, which we'll come back to in a moment. Right, so this will be the structure of the session, okay? Now, how do we do it? How do we manage the files here, and how actually do we bring the files in? So as I mentioned, we can either import some files, like just open the importer and bring them on directly to the capture folder. You can see that it's set up by default, so no need for you to think about that. And something that you need to understand, if you choose to import the files into the session, not to shoot tether, but importing the pre-existing files, is that these files will be duplicated. This is not good or bad by itself. It's just something that you need to consider when you're bringing in your files. If you're bringing them directly from an SD card, it makes a lot of sense that they are duplicated because they will just like be copied into your hard drive, into your computer, and then Capture One will create the previews. Now, if you're bringing them from another folder into your computer, you must know that they will be duplicated and a copy will be made into the capture folder, okay? This is slightly different as how it works with catalogs, so keep that in mind. We won't be importing files today. We could do that, but we are just going to focus on tethering because this is what the session is for, and I hope it's going to be fun. So this is the tool tab that we skipped in the last session. We did have a session last month, like first step with Capture One. So if you feel a little bit lost after this one, you can probably use that one. So I recommend you check it. You can find it, it's still in the B&H event space. So that's a good place to start. But today we're going to talk a lot about this tool tab that is the one we skipped in the last session, okay? This is where all the tethering tools are. So you can see that already here I have my camera tethered. It's just an old camera that I had lying around the house, and it's already connected. In order to connect your camera, you normally don't need to set up anything. At least with Canon, you don't need to set up anything. So basically, you just turn on your camera, connect a USB cable to your computer, and it should probably just show up there automatically. Just make sure that you're using the right cable. If your camera is rather new, it's most probably going to be a USB-C cable. That's a standard nowadays, which is great to have a cable that fits all cameras. Not back in the days when it was super messy and we had 5 different connections. Now it's pretty standard, and if your camera is like from this year or the past 2 years, it's most probably going to be USB-C. But in case, you can just ask at your camera store. You can ask the pals at B&H, and they will be happy to help you. But most probably it's going to be USB-C. Here I have USB 2 actually, because this is a rather old camera, but still works for this purpose. So once that you connect it to your computer, the camera will show here. So I don't know how it's set up actually. Let's just click here. This is how we can shoot remotely. I'm actually by myself in this session. Probably I would need an assistant, but I'm just trying to manage that on my own. So this is the shutter actually. So let's just press it and let's see what happens. Right. So as you can see, we have full control of the camera from within Capture One, which is very practical. I set it up as a still life, but of course you can use it also for portraits, for anything you need really. So let's just take a closer look at what's happening here. We have full control of the camera. This is the shutter speed. We can control it from here. So if we want a little bit more ambient light, we could probably use 125. But I'm located in Spain, so probably that's not going to be much of a difference. Yeah, actually no difference at all. The reason I say I'm located in Spain is because it's actually nighttime here. So there's not much of that natural light. So yeah, we can may as well leave it like that. We can, of course, also change the ISO, and we can change the aperture. In this case, I chose 1.8 because I want to have a very shallow depth of field. So I went for that. And here you have, of course, the camera information, the lens information. You have also control over the color temperature. So you can just set it manually, and you can even like use the dropper to like select a point that should be neutral. And then another interesting thing of shooting tether is that, for example, now I changed the color balance, the white balance, as you saw. So this was before. This is after I selected the dropper. The color balance, the white balance changed. And let's see what happens if we shoot again. So now if we shoot again, you can see that the image is automatically bringing in the same adjustments as the previous capture, which is typically what we want to do. We want to build on top of what we are shooting. And the whole purpose of tethering is to be able to do that, to be able to see your files on the big screen, not to settle with the little camera screen that is probably not enough for many purposes. So instead, you can have it here instantly in your computer, big screen. You can check focus, you can change lighting, and then it's pretty practical when you're shooting with clients, because then they don't need to see the raw as raw, so to say. So you can correct the white balance, and you can pretty much apply any tool in Capture One for a better result, for a better preview, if you like. And then, of course, you can change things again when you are selecting your files and when you're doing the final edits. Because all of the editing in Capture One is non-destructive, you can always go back to the raw file and then just rebuild after the session is finished. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my white balance. I feel that's better. And then let's see what else we have here. We have the camera settings. It means that we can fully control our camera from within Capture One. Well, some camera brands, to be fair, offer more control than others. Canon and Fuji offer probably the most options to dig into the camera menus and to control the cameras. Sony and Nikon might not be as friendly towards Capture One, but you can still change pretty much all the basics that you need to change. So things like, for example, if you wanted to use from a Kelvin color temperature, you could set it here. You want to change the autofocus mode. Maybe you want to shoot RAW plus JPEG or something like that. Well, change the color space. Basically, anything that you can do from your camera menu, you can do from Capture One. So think about this, for example, for a second. We have the camera setup, we have a still life, and we probably don't want to change the camera around accidentally. So it's just so much practical and so much better to control the camera from the computer. So I don't even need to stand up and check out the set. I can just do everything from here. And that's good because it means I don't need to touch the camera. And if I don't need to touch the camera, I don't risk accidentally changing the position or like moving the tripod or anything like that. So I think that's great. So if we take a look here at these settings like capture naming and capture location, we can set up different naming standards. In this case, it's just taking the name from the session and some camera and the camera counter. And you can change that if you want. You can change different counters. You can set up counters specifically for the session. Let's say, for example, that instead of the camera counter, we wanted to have just a random counter with, let's say, 3 digits, because I don't know how much we're going to shoot. And then just click OK. And let's just reset it to go back to 0. And then the next capture would actually be called Tethering Demo 001. So yeah, there is like pretty much a lot of stuff that you can do to organize your files. So where is this all going? If you remember what we said before, the next capture location is by default the capture folder. So let's see what's happening meanwhile in the hard drive. So here, capture, and here are all the files that I shot so far. And everything's going to be here nice and tidy. Another thing you must know about sessions is that they are self-contained. So they are meant to be used for one project, for one single project. So let's say, for example, I built this silly setup, kind of like imagining it would be like an Ilford ad, which would be kind of ironic because we're shooting it with digital. But, you know, for the sake of the story, just believe me. Let's say that this is like a commercial project for Ilford, and we just want to be able to see the Ilford shoot. So we don't want to mix it with other projects. We just want to keep it nice and clean. We just want to have these files here, and it's self-contained in the way that this little folder is created here, and here you shouldn't touch this folder. Actually, it contains all of the adjustments, metadata, previews, anything that Capture One needs to work. And why this is interesting and why is this important? The thing is that if you are shooting, for example, in a computer that is not yours, or you are shooting to an external hard drive, for example, if you want to back up this work, the only thing you need to do is actually just copy this whole folder, and it contains everything that you need, and you can just copy it in another hard drive and you're ready to go. Capture One doesn't need to do anything. You don't need to sync any files. There is no offline files as it happens with catalogs. So it's like pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of file management for total tethering beginners. So back to Capture One, there is like a lot of things that we can do. Also by default, as I said, all of the adjustments will be copied from the last capture. So let's say, for example, that we want to, I don't know, lift up the shadows just a bit and apply some extra contrast. So let's say we shoot again. Again, all of these adjustments, they will be reapplied. Same thing would happen with a cropping or with the color adjustments, anything, okay? Right, so let's see what else we can do actually. This is like the pre-set, so to say. So I made up this composition, but it's not perfect. I think there is room for improvement. Maybe there is a lot of elements, I don't know. We might want to work around this. So this is like a first step, and then we can build from here. So how do we actually use Capture One for building that set and for adding up to that set? So here in the camera controls, you see that we have the shutter, that we have been using. And next to that, we have this little video camera icon. It says start live view. So let's just do it. So this is a live view from the camera. It means that we're just seeing through the camera now. This is what the camera is seeing. We can zoom in 100%. We can move around the photo. We can check for composition. We can check what's happening with lighting. And most importantly, we can control the camera focus. So in most brands of cameras, you just have this AF button, and it will just autofocus on the point that it's set up in the camera. But also in Canon cameras, well, on Phase 1 cameras as well, but you know, I don't think that many of you around there in the chat are lucky owners of Phase 1 cameras. So I'm just sticking to Canon for now. With Canon and Phase 1, you can actually use these little arrows here. And I think those are brilliant. And honestly, I've considered changing to another camera brand. And the literal reason why I didn't switch to another brand it's because of this control, because I just love using this control so much. It's so useful for so many different purposes, and it just helps you so much to get your things in focus just perfectly. So how would I do this? Let's just zoom in 100%. Let's say, well, if this is an info commercial, in this case, we want to focus on the brand. So we can use these little arrows, and the 3 arrows mean it's like a bigger jump. Then we have smaller jumps and the little jumps, okay? And then we just need to keep clicking here until we see it comes on focus 100%. If the resolution is not great, it's because this camera is actually not great. But in other cameras, more modern cameras, you might be able to see it much better actually. And also because these letters are fairly small, even if they don't seem like. But well, if you're familiar with how a 35mm film roll looks like, you know that it's fairly small. So yeah, we focused on the brand. Let's just close down the live view and let's shoot again. And let's zoom in. Let's see how we did. I think that's as good as it gets with this aperture. You can also use the loop if you want. The loop is a very convenient tool. It's right here next to the hand. I'm just more used to use the hand, but you can also use the loop. And then just by clicking and holding, you can check 100% zoom any part of the image just by clicking, holding, and you can drag around. And yeah, that's a really nice way to control where focus is. So we focus now. Let's maybe edit a little bit more. I think I want to make it a little bit warmer. I'm just trying to get closer here to what it should be. No, we probably don't want to make it as green. I think that's better. Just add some contrast. Let's go down with the blacks and opening up the shadows just a little bit, just to keep a nice contrast. We can also use some clarity. Clarity will kind of make everything, all of the details pop out, but we probably don't want to do it in the whole image because we have some elements that are really out of focus. So instead of applying it to the whole image, I'm just going to like brush it in the brand, which is what we are mostly interested about. So for that, I'm just going to use some style brushes. Basically one style brush is here in the enhancement section. I think we used this one in the last session. It's called Add Detail. And Add Detail will automatically pick the brush tool. And you can brush in the adjustments that are included within this enhancement. And this is going to be a mix of clarity and structure, which if you are not very sure what that means, just to make it simple for you, it's just some adjustments to make the texture pop out. As I said, we don't want to brush it in where it's too out of focus. So let's just keep it here. It seems like it's doing nothing, but if we see the before and after, we can actually see that it has a nice effect. So I think that's good. Something else I'd like to do here, kind of get like a more vintage look. We can just come here to the levels and we can bleach out the blacks a little bit just to have shadows, but not to make the black completely black. So we're just kind of, sorry, we need to go back to the background. So yeah, you see that this washed effect. This is what I want to get here, kind of a little bit washed. The white is not really white, the black is not really white, black. And just to top it off, we're going to add some film grain. All of these adjustments, remember, are going to be applied automatically on the next captures. So let's just zoom in 100% to see what we're doing grain-wise. I really like this soft grain, but I think I'm going to go for something a little bit more aggressive, like the cubic grain. By the way, all of these film grains in Capture One are amazing. You can customize everything. You can customize the impact, which is the opacity of the grain, and the granularity, which is the size of the grain. So if you want a very aggressive grain, you can get it. And if you want something a little bit more subtle, you can also customize it to your needs. And all the different grains act in a different way, and they have different shapes and they create different patterns. So I think those are super interesting. So I think that is a little bit more like it. Lastly, we're going to add a vignette. So we're going to kind of, I think I'm going to do that in a layer actually, so I can have a little bit more of a custom effect. So I'm just going to create a new layer. I'm going to create a new empty layer. Then I'm picking the radial gradient, going to apply a very, very smooth gradient, and just place a center around the brand. That is what interests me in this case, right? So I'm just going to go down with the brightness, down with the exposure, but then still trying to keep this washed out look. And I think that this would be okay for a set. So if we see before and after, this is the raw file as it came from the camera. This is where we are now. Of course, there is a lot of room for improvement, starting with lighting. But I think it would be much better to show this to a client on set rather than this. Same thing with portraits. For example, let's say that you have a model and you want her to be more involved and be more active with what you're doing. It's important when we are working in teams that everyone in the team is up to date with what is happening. And for that, tethering is so much useful, because otherwise it's like a team of people gathering around behind a little camera screen. So that's probably not ideal. I can see some questions and answers actually, so I'm going to address those before I go on. Does it allow you to select a film simulation on a Fujifilm within Capture One? Yes, you can of course select a film simulation from Capture One. I can't show it right now because I don't have a Fuji camera tethered, but of course you can do it. And if you select one of these film simulations, it will work the same way as with the other adjustments. The same film simulation will be applied onto the next captures. Will you be bringing these controls for Fujifilm photographers? Well, I certainly hope so, because I love the Fuji colors. And as I said, I think the main reason why I didn't switch to another camera brand, it's because I don't have the focus controls. So hopefully so, fingers crossed for that. And just remember that there is feature request forum that we are taking a close look at. So if that's something you'd like to see, you can just post it there. You can share with your friends to upvote it, and hopefully it will come. Are you a collector of classic film cameras? I wouldn't call myself a collector because I actually use them, most of them. This one, I just got it not so long ago, so I haven't used it yet. This one, I did use it. I kind of fixed it myself because it was completely destroyed. I found it in a flea market in Poland, and I had to like deassemble some parts of it and like clean them on the inside because it was like in a terrible state. But it's a great camera, actually. I'm super in love with this camera. Right, some other questions here in the chat. Are you using a shortcut to flip between? Oh yeah, of course, Suzanne, sorry about that. Yes, I'm using a shortcut. I forgot to mention that to see the before and after. It's letter Y, but you can also find the button in the interface here. So if you click on here, it will show you the before and then the after. If you hover over there, you will see that the keyboard shortcut, it's next to the tool name. So before and after, and then letter Y, which is what I'm using. And then you can also choose between the full view, which is what I'm using now, and the split view slider. So this is a more dynamic way to do it. Some people prefer it this way. I personally prefer just using the full view and using the shortcut and just like changing quickly from one to another. I think that works better for me, but of course you can use what works better for you. Right, so I think there's no more questions for now. So I'm just going to move on. And yeah, just let me know if you have anything else coming up. So we have nice editing kind of. We have our camera set up, and then maybe something that we want to do is to change composition around. So for this, I have to stand up actually because I don't have no one else to do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave on the live view. And then what I'm going to try to do is get rid of this camera in the background because it's like a little bit too much information, and try to just make a new composition with what I have here, just like the medium format camera and just the film rolls. So I'm going to turn off my camera for a second, and I'm going to go there and change it around, and you're going to see it on the screen as I do that. Okay, I'm back with you, and you can see how everything is moving live view. So everything is happening instantly. It's pretty speedy. We probably need to refocus again. So because we move the things around, so it's probably a good idea to just do this again. All right. I think we're good there. And then let's just shoot. And you can see both that the same adjustments were applied, including the film grain and the layers and everything. And we just have, I think, a nicer composition. If this was like a real work, we should probably just work a little bit better on the composition for this, so it's a little bit more visible and lighting and everything, but you get it. What we can do instead, let's say if we chose this composition, is we can just leave the shadows a little bit using one of these brushes. So I'm just going to come back here to the start brushes, light and contrast, and just use the shadow recovery brush. And just a couple of brush strokes here. And probably just a little bit more here. And I think that would be a better composition. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to use green. There is like a lot of tools that you can use for composition like this. So if we go back to live view, I want to show you a couple of them. If we go back to live view, the most basic tool will be, of course, using a grid. So we can just choose to show it or to hide it. We can use different kind of grids, so a golden ratio or even a Fibonacci spiral if you would like that. Normally I stick with the 3/3 because that's like the simplest for me. But of course you can use anything you like. And if you want to like split the image in like, let's say, just like following the center, you can do that, of course. This is a nice tool that you can use if you want something a little bit more advanced. You can use overlay. Overlay is basically just adding a transparency on top of the photo, and you can use any template that you want. Let's say, for example, I would like to now go back to this old composition. Okay, this is like the old one. So let's say I would just like to go back to this, but how to do it in a nice way? When I just remove the camera, it will be super hard to just get it right. So what we will do is just like use this overlay. Like if you want to see how it's done, you just process any of the old photos, and then you just load them here. And then you can just click on show, and then you use the opacity tool, the opacity slider, and then you can see somewhere in between. And then you can just adjust the elements accordingly to make it fit the previous template. And then you can scale it and you can move it around, of course. So that's up to you. By default, it comes in 100%, which will be like fitting the frame. And then you can use this as a template to work. As I said, if you want to just like create this template, it stays activated. It's also found here next to the camera settings. So we can deactivate it just like that. If you want to make it, you have to just go to the previous photo that you want to emulate, or maybe you want to do like some template with Photoshop, like some guides or something like that. Anything that you like, really. So in this case, we're just exporting this photo. We're choosing a full-size recipe. By default, also, it's going to come to the session folder, to the output folder. So let's just use that also as a demo. So let's just export this image. That's happening right now. And then I'm just going to click on show and it's right in the output folder. So next to the capture, we have the output, and this is it. This is our exported files. And now if we want to add it as an overlay, we just drag it here, and there it shows up again. And then we are now ready to show it and to play around with the opacity to whatever fits better. So that's a really nice tool to use. I don't want to like be over informative, so let me know again if you have any questions. Meanwhile, what we can do is, because we already selected this file, we can just apply some cropping and maybe process it, and that would leave us with the end of the session. Let's say that we selected this file. We should go back to the library now and do some organization and just make sure that after the session, you know which file is a good one. Let's say that this is not only the one I like, but the one that my customer likes. And another advantage of using tethering is that you can let your clients decide what they want to do and what they want you to edit, or what they want you to retouch, and just tell them to mark it somehow. A way of doing that would be maybe just asking the client to tap on the number 5 for 5 stars for whatever they like. That would be an idea. So let's say that this is the one we selected with 5 stars, or the client selected with 5 stars. And maybe we just want to keep it here and then use some filters for when we are back home and we need to edit these files. Or another thing that we can do is just to add it to the selects folder. Let's for a minute see what happens if we try to do that. This is also something very particular with the session. So I'm just going to keep my folder right here so you can make sure to understand what's happening. So here in the capture folder, as we said, by default is where everything came in. This is the file we selected, which is the number 4004. So 004 is here. So let's say that we just want to put this in the other folder. So we can do it either from Finder or from Capture One. We just probably would do it from Capture One. So I'm just going to drag this file onto the selects folder. So it's moving from the capture folder to the selects folder. It's here. And if you take a look at the Finder here, this also happened in the Finder. So what is happening in Capture One, it's going to be mirrored in the Finder or Windows Explorer, okay? It works as a mirror. So because I moved the file from Capture One to the selects folder, this is also where we can find our file in the selects folder. I don't typically use the selects folder that much, but I see a purpose in using it for many people. I just tend to have all my files together in the same capture folder and then just use filters or smart collections or something like that. But this is the purpose of the selects folder if you'd like to use it. What would happen then if we would try to move this file from the selects folder from the Finder? So let's see what happens. Let's just grab it and let's just move it back to capture. So instantly it's disappearing from the selects folder in Capture One, and it is back here, right where it was before in our capture folder. This is important to understand because if you don't get this right, you might be kind of afraid, like, where are my files? They're gone. No, it's never like that. It's very hard to miss a file in a session because even if you delete them accidentally, they will just go to the trash. Let's say, for example, I don't like this first one because it's not on focus or whatever. So I'm just going to right click it and click delete, move to session trash. So that's gone. And here it is in the trash. You can also find it here. And you can also bring it back whenever you like. So if we just move it back to the capture folder, it's back in the capture folder and it never disappears permanently unless you go specifically into the trash and choose the option delete from disk. So that's really hard to do unintendedly. I can see another question in the chat. Oh, actually 2 of them. Deb from Vimeo saying, if I am showing a tether image to a client during a shoot, how do I show them the same image in different crops? If I shoot in rectangle, how do I show them the image as a square, for example? Okay, great. Very good question. So let's just go back here. Oh, the settings disappeared in the process, so I'm just going to reapply them, right? So let's just go back to this file, and let's say that we want to apply different croppings. So this will be the original one. So I'm just going to keep the original one because I might want to be able to show the customer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create different variants of the file. So a variant in Capture One, it's a virtual copy, what is called a virtual copy in other softwares. It means that it's not duplicating the file because we're working with raw files. It's basically data and previews that we are seeing here. So we can just duplicate the variant without making a duplicate of the file, okay? So in order to do this and to have different versions of the same file in Capture One, we can just right click on the thumbnail and then choose clone variant. There's 2 options actually, new variant and clone variant. If we choose new variant, it will just create a virgin variant, so to say, without any adjustments. So instead of doing that, I normally choose clone variant because it can give me the same starting point. And let's say that in this one, I'm going to crop it in the shape of a square. So just clicking and holding on the cropping tool, let's just choose square, and it's going to be brought in. And then we can just choose how to apply the square. That will be a different format, and we can of course create as many variants as we want. So let's just clone another one, and let's choose a more custom aspect ratio. Let's just choose, for example, 4:5. That would be something else we can do. That's probably a little bit too tight. So let's just try it in a horizontal way instead. I think I actually kind of like this one the better. I think I really like this format for 4:5. So maybe this is the one that I want to actually tag and select. Why not? So yeah, this will be the way to do it. And then you can select the different files and they will be showing all together. And if you want to go full screen to kind of put away the things that are distracting your client, you can just go full screen by choosing letter F on the keyboard. So F, shortcut for full screen. And then you can just choose to see this. What to do, for example, if like here we have a dark background, we have a black background, and it's actually pretty similar to the one we have in Capture One. So fortunately, you can just right click on the background and you can change the color for this kind of purposes. So you can, by default, it comes in dark, in very dark actually, and you can go up to light or even white. White might be a little bit too shocking, so it might make photos look darker than they actually are. So I would just probably stick to light or medium. Medium probably is the best choice actually. So now if we go full screen, we can actually see better what is happening in the terms of cropping and framing. So yeah, just keep that in mind. You can change the color of the background at any point, and you can keep whatever color you prefer. Because I'm like very used to Capture One in default, I would always choose the very dark one, but probably for this kind of shoot, it's better to have it like, as I said, in medium. So I just leave it like that, so you can all see better. There is another question. Can you quickly show us how you might move and add template layout of the capture file for overlay? Yeah, I already did that actually, but I'm just going to repeat the steps in case you missed it, Michael. So just export any file or create any file. You can just create it from the scratch in Photoshop. In this case, we just exported a file that is lying around somewhere in my desktop. No, actually, it's here in the output folder, of course. So in this case, we just processed a file with any JPEG formula. You can also use PNGs, for example, if you just want guides and on a transparent background. And then once you've done that, you can just drag it from the folder, from the Finder to the tool. And then you can see that it lights up in orange. And that is where you are adding your overlay. There's also a history of overlays. So you can also choose them from the history, or instead of dragging, you can of course just choose file and then choose any file on your computer. Just going to turn it off now. Hopefully that answered your question. And I think that is pretty much it for today. I don't know if I'm missing out anything very important. There is tons of functions that you can use for tethering. So yeah, I actually don't want to be too overwhelming. The only last important thing probably it's about backing up your files. As I said, backing up a session is incredibly easy because everything is within the same folder structure. So just going to your desktop, finding this folder, you copy that to an external hard drive, to a cloud, wherever you want to put it, and everything's going to be there, and you can rest assured that everything's there. Your files are there, your adjustments are there, your callings there, and anything that you worked on during the session, anything that you added, any information is going to be showing in this folder. And if I send you now this folder from Madrid, Spain, to you right now, and you open it with Capture One, you're not going to have any trouble at all just to open the session instantly. So that is pretty nice for collaborative workflows specifically. And of course, for backing up, it's the same kind of thing. You just copy that to an external hard drive, and that will be it. I actually use a software for that. It's right here. It's always like running in the background. It's called Carbon Copy Cloner. just going to open it. This is a really nice software. There is actually different softwares that do the same thing. There's Carbon Copy Cloner and ChronoSync and stuff like that. And the way I do my backups, I always work in sessions, actually, regardless if I'm shooting tethered or I'm importing my files, because I'm kind of a disorganized person mentally. So for me, it just makes so much more sense to keep everything organized in different folders and just to not mix one project with another. Of course, there is advantages to using catalogs. In the next session, we will talk only specifically about catalogs, if that's something that interests you. So in my case, I prefer using sessions because I just prefer to have one folder for each thing. It just works so much better for me. And it doesn't have to work the same way for you, but it just does work so much better for me. So in the end of the day, what I do have is tons of folders with different dates of them, with different names for projects. And they are just all of them stored in the hard drive called Archive A. And then using this little nice piece of software, what I'm doing is like once a week, they're being automated. Everything is mirrored into two different hard drives. So Archive B in this case is a mirror copy of Archive A, and Archive C over here in another task is also a mirror copy of Archive A. So if Archive A catches on fire, Archive B and Archive C are still okay. And the risk of information loss is minimum because this is happening once a week. Or I can also trigger it manually if I'm doing a lot of work and I want it to be triggered manually. And it doesn't take so much longer because it's just copying whatever is not there before. So it's just synchronizing the changes, so to say. And I don't get anything out of this software, but it's just a very nice software in my opinion. And if you are looking for a solution to organize your backups, it's probably a good idea. Okay, so more questions. Can you import an overlay template from InDesign to Capture One? In fact, I've never done that, but I'm assuming that as long as it's a compatible file, you can of course do that. I know for a matter of fact that TIFFs, JPEGs, and PNGs are compatible. I'm not sure about PDFs though, but I'm not really familiar with InDesign, but I think that you can probably export that as a JPEG, probably, or as a PNG. And if you can do that, then it's definitely compatible with the overlay tool in Capture One. More questions. After backing up the session, is it possible to move or copy the best select image to a library? Yes, definitely. It will be different if you want to copy the raw file itself or the final file, so to say the JPEG or the TIFF that you exported. So if you process the file, it would be now in your, yeah, let's just do it like for fun. This is the aspect ratio that I like the most. So I'm just going to export it. I'm just selecting this full size, highest quality, exporting one image. And it's here in my output folder. So this is 004. This is my image, okay? So once that you have processed this file, you can just copy it wherever you want, to a library, to a cloud, whatever. And because this is a JPEG and there is no Capture One information stored at all. On the other hand, if what you would like to store is the raw file itself, you can also do it. And then what I recommend you to do is to pack it as an EIP. EIPs are files that are native to Capture One, and they are incredibly useful for when you're working from different computers or where you're working with different people that also need to open your files. So what we would do here is to pack it as an EIP. First of all, how do we do that? And what is that even? You're probably wondering. So let's just see how it works. It's very easy to do. So if this is the file that I like, just right-clicking on it, and then you have an option here in this drop-down menu that says pack as EIP. So let's just click that. As you can see, visually nothing changed, but the extension of the file did change. So now instead of CR2 is EIP, and it actually kept all of these three variants. So all of this information, the variants, is going to be stored in this EIP. And what the EIP file is, actually, it's kind of a package. So think about a zip package, for example, that includes different files. So the EIP kind of follows the same logic, but it's a file that is native to Capture One. And this package includes everything that Capture One needs to reopen this file in any other session, location, or library. So it includes the raw file itself, adjustments, previews, metadata, the star rating, the color tags, keywords, any kind of information that you put into Capture One, it's going to be stored in this EIP package, right? So if you want to share this with another person or just copy that to another library, you would just have this EIP package. Then you would just search it on the folder actually. So you can see that it also changed here. So instead of CR2, now we have EIP. And then this file is like self-contained as well. And then you can move it wherever you want. And then always that you have Capture One, you can access this information within this EIP package. Okay, so thank you. Copy images from a session into a catalog. Okay, right. Then I'm just going to give you another explanation. Thanks for bearing with me. Of course, you can do that as well. What you would do in this case, let's just create a new catalog just for demo purposes. And then let's say I used to do that actually, but I stopped doing it because it was like a long process, I felt. But let's just create a catalog that is called, for example, image archive. And let's do it and let's see what would happen if you want to bring in the session into the catalog. This is like combining the best of both worlds, kind of, because you have a very structured file archive, and then you have a catalog to browse through all of your images, through all of your projects without needing to go into each specific session to see these specific files. So when you create a catalog, you just go here into File, Import Session, and then you would just search for your session, tethering demo. This one, you just choose Import. And what is happening is that these files are being brought into the catalog. The folder itself is going to be kind of translated as a project. And in here we have the folders that were kind of translated as albums into the catalog. And here you have everything you need. This is our select, this is our files adjusted, this is our star rating and our cropping, and everything is already here. And as I said, the good thing about this is that you can browse all of your images through one single catalog, through one single file, not having to go into each different session separately, looking for one image. So that's actually a very smart way to work. As I said, I kind of stopped doing it because I'm messy, kind of. So I stopped that, but it's a good idea probably to do that. Something else that I normally do is I always try to give my session names that actually make sense. So in this case, it doesn't fully make sense unless there is a date. So what I would normally do is write the date before the session name actually, just to make sure that everything is organized by date in the Finder and that I can find any project that I want easily. So I think there is that. I don't know if there is any other questions. If you have any more questions, now is the time to ask.
That's
so let me know.
Speak now or forever hold your peace, as they said right before I was getting married. So Maria, you're taking my job. I don't even need to be here anymore. You already know what's going on. You know how to work everything. So next session, May 19th, I'm just gonna kind of sit here and just watch you. That's it.
Fantastic. Always welcome.
Excellent. Maria's excited. She's like, wonderful. She's like, get out of here. Let me just do what I got to do and leave me alone. Awesome. Maria, I think we all took away a lot of great information. And I think we got a lot of great questions answered. So thank you, everybody who tuned in and asked your questions. That's always the point of these, is to be able to help you guys make things easier for you. If you have questions, ask them, and this way we can address them and hopefully improve your workflow and make your life easier. But thank you again to Maria as well as Capture One. Thank you to everybody for being here. This has been another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you next time.